All right, we're jumping right in today to tackle what is, without a doubt, one of the most intense and sobering verses in the entire Bible. We're going deep into the book of Revelation to really deconstruct the meaning behind a single, pretty terrifying image, the cup of unmixed wrath.
Wow. Yeah, it's heavy stuff to say the least. That one sentence is just packed with powerful, almost overwhelming imagery. Okay, let's dive into this and really unpack what these words actually mean by looking at the original language and the world they were written in. So, first things first, let's start with that central image, this cup. You gotta understand it's not just a physical object here, it's a powerful symbol. And if we're gonna understand this verse, we have to understand what that cup symbolizes. The verse talks about drinking the wine of God's wrath. Now, the Greek word here is oinos, and in ancient texts, wine is a fascinating symbol, you know? It can mean blessing, joy, celebration, but just as often, it's a metaphor for divine judgment. To drink a cup of something meant you were about to experience its contents completely, to the fullest.
So, what's in this wine? What's it made of? Wrath. But the Greek word thymos is so important here. This isn't just being kind of annoyed or a simmering anger. No. Thymos describes a sudden, passionate, boiling fury, like a violent explosion of rage. So the image we're getting is a cup filled to the absolute brim with the undiluted experience of that intense anger. And now we get to what is really the heart of this verse, and it all hinges on this one single Greek word, akratos. It's a pretty rare word, and it is the absolute key to understanding the sheer severity of this image. It means, simply, unmixed.
See, here's the thing. In the ancient world, you almost never drank wine straight. It was just common practice to mix it with water to dilute it, make it drinkable. But the wine in this cup is served akratos, unmixed. Our source material points out this is an absolutely terrifying detail. It means God's judgment is being served at full, raw strength. There's nothing mixed in to soften the blow. No mercy, no grace. It is pure, uncut wrath. So, what are the consequences of drinking from this cup? Let's move on and see exactly what that torment looks like, because the verse doesn't stop there. The verse is very direct. It says whoever drinks this cup shall be tormented. And the original Greek, basanistesitai, leaves absolutely no room for doubt. It literally means to be afflicted with severe, agonizing pain, to be tortured. There's really no way to soften that. But then we get to one of the most startling, maybe confusing details in the whole passage. This torment isn't happening in some dark, forgotten corner of the universe. No, it's taking place in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. Right there, in front of them. So you have to ask, why? Why would this torment happen in the presence of pure holiness? And this is where our source commentary offers a really profound explanation. The idea is that hell is not the absence of God. It's actually the full, unshielded presence of God. It's the experience of being completely exposed to his absolute purity and holiness, but without any kind of covering or protection. And this next part from our source really illustrates that concept brilliantly. It points to another verse from Hebrews that says, "For our God is a consuming fire." Think about that for a second. For someone who is protected by grace, that fire can purify and refine. But for someone with no covering, that exact same fiery, holy presence becomes the very source of their torment. It's an unavoidable, direct exposure. Now, I know this is all incredibly bleak, but the analysis from our source material doesn't stop here. In fact, it introduces this profound contrast, a second cup that completely reframes this entire passage. The sources take us all the way to the Garden of Gethsemane, right before the crucifixion. Remember when Jesus is praying to the Father, asking if it were possible for this cup to pass from him? Well, the argument being presented is that the cup Jesus is talking about is the very same cup of wrath we've just been discussing. So let's just put these two cups side by side for a second. On one hand, you have the cup of judgment from Revelation, unmixed fury, leading straight to torment. But on the other hand, you have this cup of atonement. Our sources suggest that Jesus drank that cup of God's wrath for us, and in doing that, the contents were totally transformed. The unmixed fury became mixed with his sacrifice, with grace, and now instead of torment, it offers forgiveness and life. So the crucial point the sources make is this: the choice determines which cup is faced. The argument is that Jesus willingly drank that cup of wrath so that others wouldn't have to. So, to reject that sacrifice is by default to choose to face that exact same cup in its original, unmixed form. This whole idea frames the final judgment not as God arbitrarily sending people to hell, but as the direct, inevitable consequence of an individual saying no to the grace being offered. And this leaves us with the final, really provocative thought from our sources. We're presented with two cups, and they symbolize two completely different realities. One is filled with unmixed judgment. The other is filled with atoning grace. The ultimate question, then, isn't about which cup God hands out. It's about which one is chosen.